All right, on to passage 5 of test 4 for the ACT English. Let's get to it. It's called Roberto Clemente in right field, and it's about this very good baseball player who passed away, but he did a great amount of charitable work. So let's get to the question. 61. Roberto Clemente, the Pittsburgh Pirates right fielder from 1955 to 1972, was one of baseball's most gifted athletes. Okay. What you need to be focused on, it says one of baseball's. Well, baseballs is plural without an apostrophe, but what you need is an apostrophe because this is possessive. He is one of the sport's most gifted athletes. Okay, this athlete you could say belongs to baseball, as weird as it sounds, possessive. And so in this case, you wouldn't need to just add an apostrophe to fix that. D does that, obviously. No change doesn't work. What about B? One of baseballs. Don't separate the nouns from their prepositional phrases if the prepositional phrases come after the noun. So this that's wrong for that reason. And this has that problem and it doesn't have the apostrophe. So D is the correct answer. 62. He was entitled the National League batting champion 4 times, the National League most valuable player in 1966, and the World Series MVP in 1971. Okay, well, entitled doesn't exactly fit here. Entitled means you just you either feel almost like you feel like you overly deserve it, or you were sort of given something, like someone in I don't know, 500 years ago was was given land and deed to this grant of land, and they were called Sir Frederick, Lancelot or something. Or it could say entitled also has the meaning of you were given this title, like in a document you entitled it with Roberto Clemente in right field. So entitled wouldn't work here. Awarded doesn't exactly make sense, because if you're the National League MVP, you're not awarded the MVP. You could get awarded the MVP award, right? Well, and if you're the National League batting champion, well, you're not awarded that. You just are that because you've hit the balls, the most out of anybody, or at the highest percentage, or something. I don't know about baseball a lot, but these are things that he not was awarded or given, but something that you could say he earned, and as a result, all you can do is say he is that. So named could work. He was named the batting champion. Yeah, he got the most hits, so he's obviously been named the batting champion. Just like he was named the MVP. That doesn't mean he was awarded the MVP award. That's a little different. What about given? He wasn't given this stuff. He wasn't given the National League batting champion. He was named it because that's what he did. So the only answer that makes any sense is H, named. 63. If you go to 63, it says the World Series MVP in 1971. Well, there's nothing really wrong with this. In 1966, in 1971. When did he get that World Series MVP? In that year. All right. Well, all of these are pretty much the exact same thing. They're just all this extraneous wording. Do you need to say was awarded to Clemente? Award in 1971, award was given to him? No. It's understood. He was named this. He was named the batting champion, the MVP, and the World Series MVP. Okay? You don't need to say the award was given to him in blah, blah, blah. It's already understood. Okay? Just say in 1971. It cuts out all the redundancy. Okay? The other thing is, it really changes the sentence. I think pretty much all of these do. If you have, for example, you have this list here, right? Of 3 things: batting champion, league MVP, World Series MVP, right? Now, because there's this list with parallel structure, you don't have an and here because you don't need it. You have an and at the before the second and the third one, okay, before the last one is listed? Well, if you have a new verb here, awarded in 1971, and if you have and the World Series MVP in 1971 was awarded to Clemente, if you're using B as an example, you'd have a new subject, the World Series MVP, and was awarded the new verb. Well, if you have a new subject, new verb, sure, you can have this and here, and comma, to separate it from the rest, but then this would be incorrect because you'd have a list of two things and you would need a conjunction, not a comma, okay? It's because when you're only listing two things, in this case a compound object, two objects, meaning two things that are being entitled, or if you know the answer, if you're two things that are being named, they're just compound objects, right? You just separate them with the word and, okay? If it's just two things, and again, by having one of these answer choices, you introduce a new verb, okay, and in a new subject, and it screws up how this list is punctuated grammatically, okay? And then other than that, again, it really is the redundancy issue. I think that's the error that should most stick out. 64 says, while Clemente's achievements in the sport of baseball are impressive, his charity work off the field has marked himself as one of blah, blah, blah. Okay. This is not a complete sentence, all right? While is basically just this, you could call it a conjunctive adverb, and basically it's like the word however. It's all of these things, except unlike however, while can be used as a conjunction. While I like this, he did this, or I was eating this while I was doing that. The format for this is while one thing, comma, new subject, new verb. Okay? Because this part is just a dependent clause. It's a sentence fragment. It's saying, at the same time he was doing something, Clemente did this. This should be the subject, this should be the verb. Okay? Or not work off, has marked. Okay? Should be the verb. Here, there's no subject and no verb with that first sentence. So that's wrong. G, the problem with G is that even though it makes a comma with this, it allows for the new subject, new verb, you shouldn't have that contrast word there. It's just while doing this, he did this, okay? But introduces sort of like another word here that offers this contrast where this is not exactly a contrast, but it's like a comparison word. As he's doing this, something else happened, and now you introduce this, but it almost makes it very logically difficult to understand what the sentence is trying to say. And if you have H, impressive, and his, this also doesn't follow the format. Moreover, it makes this whole thing, it makes while his achievement are impressive, it almost makes it makes it the sentence, if you just have this and, it makes that sentence where it's while he's doing, while this, and while that, what? It sort of makes it sound like there's a subject and verb that are still left out here, okay? It makes it sound like the subject and verb are still left out. And so J is the only one that fixes it. Again, it follows that while this, something else. While he was doing this, his charity work, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Or his work off the field. His charity work off the field. So J is the only correct answer. 65. His charity work off the field has marked him. Well, it says himself, right? Well, this himself is reflexive, like herself, itself. It's reflexive, it's referring to oneself. You only use that when you really emphasize, like, in terms of, like, if I'm the teacher, right, I could say, this is a hard question. Even I don't understand it. or I myself don't understand it. It kind of emphasizes that that the not understanding is a bigger deal, because as a teacher, maybe a teacher should know that kind of stuff, as as an example. Or if I say if I'm doing something to myself, like if I'm if I'm petting myself, or if I'm flicking myself, or brushing myself. I don't know, but in this case, there's no need to have that reflexive term here. And so what would work? It would say his charity work off the field has marked him, because you need to use the object form. You don't say marked he, because him is the object of the verb marked, right? If it was he, it would have to say he marked, all right? But because this is the object of marked, use the object form of the pronoun him. You wouldn't use them, and you wouldn't use itself, because this is referring to Roberto Clemente. So that's a person, so you use him. You don't use itself. You don't use it. Itself is still reflexive, and them is plural. I mean, you don't even know, what is that? It's supposed to be about Clemente. So B is the only answer choice that works. 66. It says, in 1972, Clemente died in a plane crash while delivering relief supplies to earthquake victims in Nicaragua. Oh, it's so sad. Well, perished in a deadly. If someone perished, that means they died. If it's deadly, they died, right? If it was why would you say he survived a deadly car crash? That you could say that, I guess, but you could say maybe it's like normally deadly for most people, or it was deadly for others, but this is redundant. What about fatally perished? Perished means you died. Fatal, it means dead. Died and lethal are also synonyms, basically. Lethal means it was fatal. So the only one that doesn't have this redundancy issue is F. I think these redundancy questions are like the easiest questions. They could be if once you get the hang of it, they can be the easiest, the fastest questions to just do, which is great. All right, number 67, it says, which of the following alternatives to the underlined portion would not be acceptable? Keyword not. So it says, in 1972, Clemente died in a plane crash while delivering relief supplies to earthquake victims in Nicaragua. All right. Well, while he was delivering, sure, that makes sense, right? He died while he was on his way to deliver, while he was in the process of sending this stuff, right? As he was delivering, sure, as he was, that's very similar to as or while. As and while are basically synonyms. It's I was doing this while I did that. I did this as I did that. What about that was delivering? It says Clemente died in a plane crash, that was delivering. If you have this word that, that's a relative pronoun, and it refers to the noun that came right before. So if you have that right after crash, was the plane crash delivering relief supplies? No, that doesn't make sense anymore grammatically. Moreover, the only way you could have a good relative pronoun would be who, not that, right? Because who was doing the delivering? Roberto Clemente was doing the delivering, and that is a person, so you use the word who. You don't use the word that, okay? With people you use who, with things you use that. And then you could say as, and then it says as he delivered relief supplies to earthquake victims in Nicaragua. That is the same issue as these. Those are fine because they're all saying that he was doing something, whereas C is makes it sound like the plane crash is the one that was delivering. Okay? So 68 says projects which were designed to last for years. All right. If you have long-term humanitarian projects, how long are they going to last? 5 seconds? No, they'll probably last for a long time. They're long-term humanitarian projects. So this does seem to be an issue of redundancy. projects that would help others. Well, if it's humanitarian, doesn't it mean it's helpful for humanity? Projects of benefit to others, same thing. Redundant with humanitarian. Projects is the only one that seems to not have this mistake. It doesn't have any redundancy with the words long-term and humanitarian. So in this case, 68 is F. Okay, 69. All right, a few years later, his wife Vera fulfilled this dream by founding the Roberto Clemente Ciudad Deportiva in Puerto Rico. All right, well, what is going on here? If we read this sentence, you have this modifying clause a few years later, and then you say his wife Vera. Well, what's the verb? The verb is fulfilled, right? So the subject needs to be like somewhere around there, right? And you certainly shouldn't have a comma after Vera, only after Vera, because you'd have a separation between the subject and verb with a comma. And you don't separate subjects and verbs with commas, all right? The only way this could work is if you have a comma after wife. So it says his wife, and then you have this a positive, meaning an interrupting noun clause modifier, Vera. His wife, you could almost say in parentheses, Vera, her name was Vera, fulfilled this dream. So the subject would be his wife, and fulfilled this dream would be the predicate nominative. Fulfilled is the verb. And you could possibly have this sentence work with his wife, no comma, his wife Vera with no commas, but you pretty much do need those commas because the name of his wife is not essential to the meaning it doesn't change the meaning of the sentence by having the name of his wife there, does it? It's not a specific kind of wife. It's not like he had 4 wives. If he had 4 wives and if you said his wife Vera fulfilled, then it might make more sense not to have commas. But in this case, he only has 1 wife, and you do need those commas there, all right? And commas on both sides. So which one does that? Well, C does that. B has B does that, but C does not have this comma here. So if you read it, it says, a few years later, his wife, comma, Vera fulfilled this dream by founding. It's sort of confusing. It's almost like you don't understand. It says his wife, and then it says Vera. Is his wife Vera? It's sort of unclear. And again, you have a positive, Vera, that you need to separate with commas on both sides or just no commas at all in cases where it's essential. But in this case, Vera is not really an essential, modifying clause. You don't need that there. So this is wrong. It's just missing the comma here, all right? And then D, well, D is wrong because you need a comma after later. And then his wife, Vera, you have this comma coming between the subject and the verb, and you shouldn't have a comma between the subject and verb. So that's wrong. No change is wrong. And so the only answer that makes sense is B. All right, let's go to number 70. It says the best placement for the underlined portion would be, well, where's the underlined portion? Right here. It says one of them was for children, a sports complex in his homeland. Okay, if you say one of them was for children, the problem with this is that you basically have just like this dangling little sports complex in his homeland. You basically just have like, subject, verb, object, you could say object, and then you say, or object phrase, and then you have a sports complex in his homeland. You just basically have a bunch of nouns that sort of follow without any kind of proper separation with prepositions or punctuation of any kind. And so this is basically seems to be sort of like a run-on sentence to a degree. So this is ordered improperly. What about word after the word them? If you have one of them, what for children was a sports complex? Well, one of them for children that could make sense because one of the humanitarian projects for children was a sports complex. Logically, that makes sense, or grammatically, they make sense, but it's probably not the clearest way to put them. It's sort of not a proper way to write things usually. One of them for this, as opposed to maybe a better way to put this preposition, better place. Let's see. Let's say after the word complex, one of them was a sports complex, or one of the humanitarian projects was a sports complex for children. Oh, that seems to make sense. A sports complex for children, right? Because he had lots of humanitarian projects, it seems. Not all of them maybe were for children. And so this one was a sports complex specifically for children. It really describes very clearly what was for children. It was the sports complex that was for children, probably more specifically than, a project as a way of saying it. It's just a lot clearer here, and it follows more, you could say, like standard English. And then you have, after the word homeland, well, if you have one of them was for children, a sports complex, or one of them was a sports complex in his homeland for children, if you have for children after homeland, it almost sounds like the homeland was a homeland for children. And his homeland is just where he's from, right? It's not a place he's from that's for children. And so the only place that really is very clear is after complex. And then if you have it, one of them for children, it's just a little less clear, but this is much more specific to the complex, so it's just a better place, clearer place to put it. So H would be the correct answer. 71, for the sake of the logic and coherence of this paragraph, sentence 4 should be placed. All right, where should sentence 4 be placed? One of them, it's this sentence we just did. Where could it be placed? So where it's now? Well, where it's now doesn't really make sense, because what is this talking about? Each year, this 304-acre sports counseling blah, blah, blah center provides thousands of Peru can use the chance for a better life. Well, this is a very specific piece of information, and this is about the general project, right? This probably should come first, and then it talks about what it does, okay, or how it's impacted people. What about before sentence 1? Well, if you say before sentence 1, it says one of them. Well, what's them we're going to refer to? If you have this sentence first, them needs to be referring to something. It needs to have a proper antecedent, a noun it refers to. And in this case, because it would come first, it would be unclear. What about after sentence 1? That seems to make sense because it said he was planning long-term humanitarian projects for designed to last for years. One of the humanitarian projects was a sports complex for children. So that seems to make sense. And then if you have after sentence 2, it said she fulfilled this dream by founding the Roberto Clemente Ciudad Deportiva in Puerto Rico. Well, that's talking about what it specifically was, and this says one of them. One of what? Well, one of them, again, is a plural pronoun. It should be referring to projects, but if you have it come after sentence 2, is there even a plural noun anywhere here that it could refer to? No. So again, I think this word them really just gives it away. It needs to have that proper antecedent so you know what them is talking about, and the only place where that actually works is after sentence 1. And moreover, logically, it is a good fit where it talks about how Clemente was planning these things. One of the things he planned was this, and then his wife fulfilled this dream by actually building it, and then many kids could enjoy it. So that actually makes logical sense, and then it also makes grammatical sense because of the word them. 72. All right, 72. It says, since 1970, Major League Baseball has presented an award annual recognizing the player who best exemplifies. Okay. The problem here is that if you have this word annual before award, you could say Major League Baseball has presented an annual award that would work because annual is an adjective, and adjectives can only describe nouns. Well, to describe award, it would have to come before award. So the only thing that annual could be modifying is presented or recognizing, okay? And to do that, to modify either verbs or adverbs or other adjectives, meaning non-nouns, you basically need to have this be an adverb, annually, okay? So which answer choice does that? Answer choice G does that, annually presenting an award. What about presented an award on an annually basis? This doesn't work because basis is a noun, and to modify a noun, this would need to be an adjective. To be an adjective, you need to cross out the ly. And what about J, presented an annually award? This gave that option I gave earlier, but the problem with this is that annually is again an adverb, and if it comes right before award, it's modifying award. So how can an adverb modify this noun? Well, it shouldn't. So this is wrong. So the only answer choice that makes sense is G. What about 73? 73 says who best exemplifies the principles of sportsmanship and community service. All right, well, they gave you two options. They gave you principals and principles, LES, okay? This sounds really corny, but the way to remember this is, like, you know, the principal of your school, you know, like the president or the wonjang or whatever you call him. He's like the principal. That's what you call a principal in the U.S. He's like your pal, principal. I know that's really corny because no, wonjangs are not your pals, but you could at least say, well, they're pals, like they're like people, right? But principles are like, but principles with LES are more like, you know, standards or you know, convictions or values. And so PALS, A and B would both be wrong. And now you have a choice between C and D, principles in, principles of. Well, idiomatically, it should be of. You say principles of this, you don't say principles in this. And I know that I wish I could explain it better, but this is one of those things where it's called an idiomatic expression, where that preposition just goes with that word in this cases like this. In does not follow principles in cases like this. And there are a lot of times with prepositions you can sort of logically figure it out, but sometimes you just have to understand or you just have to memorize a lot of the idiomatic expressions. I mean, in this case you could probably figure it out if you just say principles of. Well, of means what does it consist of, what the consistency of it. Like, it's what kinds of principles. You could say the sportsmanship and community service principles. They're not principles in something, and that's a way you could sound it out. But sometimes, you know, the best way is just to get a lot of repetition, so that it becomes a bit of a faster process. Okay. 74. Which choice would best help this sentence to summarize key points made in the essay? 74 says, the effects of his generosity continue to expand as the story of his life is told to others. Well, this grammatically makes sense, right? And it's a nice little way of saying it, but logically it doesn't. The effects of his generosity continue to expand. How do the effects of his generosity expand when his story is told? Like, do I feel like, wow, I really got something for free from this guy because I heard his story? Oh yeah, there's money in my pocket, or you know, wow, now I can play basketball here. Well, no, the story is just told, right? But so logically, this doesn't really make sense. What about G? Inspiring ball players and improving the lives of young people. So sure, it does. His record does inspire people, probably both baseball and in terms of charitable work, and improving the lives of the effects of his generosity continue to expand, and the effects of generosity are also improving the lives of young people. Yeah, those effects are improving, not the story that's being told. So G would work. What about H? And we can learn more about him in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Does this even summarize the key points? I mean, we know he was a great baseball player, but most of the passage was, and certainly more than half the passage, was about his humanitarian work and how he died, and how his wife helped pass on some of the things he did. This is more focused, it seems, about he won this award, and let's read about that. So it doesn't really summarize the key points. What about J? Regardless of whether the Pittsburgh team makes the playoffs or not, this has nothing to do with whether his team has a winning record. So this is just irrelevant. So the only answer choice that really makes sense is G, and it really does summarize the key points, the baseball playing aspect and the improving the lives aspect. And this is just a lot vaguer, the story of his life, but it's not as specific, okay? Aside from the fact that logically it doesn't really work. And then 75, last one. Upon reviewing notes for this essay, the writer comes across the following true statement. Recent recipients of this honor include Sammy Sosa, Tony Gwynn, and Curt Schilling. If the writer were to use this sentence, the most logical place to add it would be at the end of paragraph what? 2, 4, 5, or 6? Okay, so recipients of this honor. So there's some award being presented. So at the end of paragraph 2, paragraph 2 talks about he died. Oh, and then recipients of this award. Death is not really an award, so it wouldn't be after paragraph 2. What about 4, 5, and 6? 4 offers baseball, softball. So this is about the project. Is the project like some award that was also given to some other people? Nope. What about 5? In 1970, the award was renamed the Roberto Clemente Award, and it would make sense to say it was also given to right? So this makes sense. And is there any mention of an award at the end of paragraph 6? No, there isn't. That's actually the conclusion. So it would make sense at the end of paragraph 5. So C5 is the answer. So good job. You finished 4 of these practice tests, or gone through the explanations of them. And you have one more test to go, test 5. So whenever you're ready, we'll get to that next.